Championship,
where our veterans' voices are heard. MBR Talk.
Hey, thanks for supporting our channel by watching and listening.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
when life shapes us, when love anchors us, when loss changes us, we are not left behind. We are carried forward, held by faith, rooted in purpose, finding our way. This is Carried Forward, a space for stories of resilience, purpose, and forward resolve. Hi, welcome to Carried Forward. Today we're having a guest. Her name's Michelle Jordan, and today's conversation we're going to be speaking about kind of a grief that's not often seen, or maybe not talked about. Maybe people see it, but they don't really know how to deal with it. When we think about losing a spouse, we usually think about someone who's still married when that loss happens. But grief is not always that simple. And sometimes love, history, pain, family, and responsibility continue long after a marriage ends. And with death comes the grief that's still real, married or not married. And even if those people are no longer in our lives or not in the same area of our lives, it's still grief and it's still real. As I mentioned, Michelle Jordan is here as my guest today, and she's going to bring her perspective on exactly what I just spoke of, that many people need to hear. And I think her story is important. We're going to talk about loss of her ex-husband, the long impact of combat trauma and PTSD, the weight of helping her children prepare for the inevitable loss, and what it means to grieve when the world may not recognize around you that you need a place to grieve. This is a conversation about disenfranchised grief, about complicated love, and about the place they may need to be, a place that may be very lonely, but needs to be felt, and people need to hold space for that. So let's get into it. Thank you, Michelle, for being here.
Yeah, of course.
So can you tell us a little bit about your marriage, your family, and what was happening before your divorce?
Yeah, so I met my ex-husband in the military. We were both Army, young kids. I mean, I think I was an A3 when I met him. He was an E4. We just had a whole head full of dreams and things we were going to go and do. And we ended up getting married. We had our three, my oldest, who is now 28, she'll be 29 this year, and Brianna, and then my middle one, Jalen, who's just turned 26, and the baby, Kyra, who is turning 24. So two of them were born on the base we met at in California, and one in Louisiana where we went after. So, like a lot of relationships, it started off, especially military relationships, what I've noticed, everything started off pretty uncomplicated. It just, things were what they were. We did our things. I mean, we were both in the field off and on, and we were stationed at NTC, which is the National Training Center for the Army. So desert training. So we were on cycles where one week he'd be in the field, and maybe another week I'd be in the field, or what have you. So, things were good for a while. The military community is tricky, as you know, when it comes to wholesome and marriages. And there's a lot of trapdoors, I like to call them, in the military environment. Just you've got people coming from all over the world coming together from different backgrounds. And we started to realize, after I think my second, that we started to have arguments, and he was struggling a little bit because he'd become, an E5. And so now he had the weight of being responsible for other people under him. And he began drinking. I would say at first it was probably it seemed a little more social. But then it became kind of like often social, and at first it was fun. I mean, he seemed to handle it fine. It was just his way to unwind, and, he was in a good mood when that was happening, and, nothing, the kids were safe. Everything was fine. It wasn't anything bad, like, but I just noticed, and as we got to go into, getting to a place where 9/11 happened. We were both in California at the time when that happened. So both of us were doing, duty immediately. I think a lot of bases, that was the case. At the time I was dealing with an injury, the injury that I ended up getting out of the military with. So I was going through a medical board, and his unit ended up deploying. He didn't deploy right away. And that created some, I would say, the probably domino effect. That's the first domino I think that fell, was him feeling that, obligation to his soldiers, and the fact that he didn't go. And then we PCS'd. I went to Fort Polk. There was no tanks there. So the closest place he could go, he's a tanker, was Fort Knox. And so I had the two older ones with me. The youngest wasn't born yet. And he went there, and that created some additional challenges. Then we started understanding that there was a lot going on, that it's tough, right? I don't want to disparage his memory for the kids, but
so you were living in two different bases.
Right. So, infidelity.
And you had the kids, and he was just on his own. Okay.
Yeah. And so not having that family support, I mean, I would say it, and this is where it gets tricky, right? A lot of people would be like, well, no, he just made those bad decisions. But I knew him, and I knew that a lot of what was happening was because he was just struggling. He was really struggling, and he didn't know how to deal with it. And so, and being away from his family, I mean, he loved his kids to death. So that was never an issue. So anyways, we ended up getting a compassionate reassignment where he was able to come to Louisiana. I think he partly resented that because he ended up in a staff position. He wasn't able to do the job he normally does because there were no tanks there.
Yeah.
Then shortly after that, we actually got married there. So we weren't married up until that point. We were both on the same base. And that was part of why when we moved, he was in one base, I was in another, because we weren't married.
Yeah. That's unusual for military couples. Usually you do get married so you can have all those benefits and move with each other if possible.
Yeah. And that was the plan. It's just, we were going to get married. Then we had our second little one, and I had some complications there. So that kind of put it off, and then we got orders. And so it was just really wasn't the plan we had in mind, but it did happen that way. And so we got married. He came and visited in Louisiana. We got married, and then filed for compassionate reassignment for him to come down there. And I noticed things started to just get worse, partly because I think, like I said, I think he just was not happy not doing the job that he really wanted to do, and with the soldiers that he really wanted to be with. And he got orders to Germany, and I had gotten out. My medical board completed while we were in Louisiana, so I got out of the military. And I think that was in April. It was April of 2002. And then he got his orders. And so he left in January of 2003. We were going to go together to Germany. But my middle one didn't, his passport was not, for whatever reason, his passport was the one that was delayed. It was kind of odd because we had a newborn baby that I would think that would be the one that got delayed. But so he went to Germany alone for a few months and left. We were back in the States, and just that created a lot of tension, stress. He's obviously over in Germany on his own, in the military environment, especially in the Army anyways. Military environment's tough, but overseas duty stations are really tough for families. They had a saying, when you go to Germany, you either come back pregnant, divorced, or with a cuckoo clock. So they always warned you, go get a cuckoo clock when you first get there.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so shortly after we got to Germany, though, his unit was notified they were going to deploy. And so then he began doing training exercises. I mean, he was gone a lot. And I noticed when he was home, the drinking got worse. The stress got worse. I mean, now he's 6. He's got an entire group of young men that he's going to be responsible for. And that really was weighing on him a lot. They deployed, and he got injured shortly after they deployed and got medevaced back. I mean, he was intubated, like not awake. It was not great. Their tank got hit by an IED.
Oh gosh. Okay.
And the driver died instantly, and he, being the tank commander, was next to the driver. So, I mean, he ended up in flames, and they got stuck. There's the type of tank they were in had a hatch to go out, or the one in the back. I can't remember the name of the tank, but so they were trying to get out, and then, you know, finally they got out, and he got medevaced back to Germany. And I would say that was probably the most stressful thing I think I've ever been through at that point.
Yeah.
I was working.
You were still in the States?
No, I was in Germany, but I was working
Okay.
at the Army Community Service Center that day. And that day they, you know, and I'd been there enough to know, like, if the chaplains come in or they come knocking on your door, like, and your husband's deployed, it's not good.
Yeah.
So when I got a phone call on my lunch break, I happened to be at the exchange a little bit away from where I worked. His first sergeant called me and was like, asked if I was at work. And I said, no, why? Like, it was kind of odd, but I think in my heart, I already knew, like, my heart sank. Like, I knew this isn't good. He's like, okay, well, when you get back, I'll meet you over there. And I'm like, okay. You know, and so of course I just put everything I had in my buggy. I just like left the buggy and went over there, because I'm like, I got to figure out what's going on. And working in Army Community Service, we had seen enough people coming through getting services to help support them when things like that happen, that I just knew something in me told me. And that's what it was. When I got there, my boss and the first sergeant and a chaplain were all standing like right there at the door. And so, I'll be honest, the first couple of weeks after they told me that, I mean, even in the hospital, it was really a blur. So much so that months later, I got a call from CID, which is the military. For those that don't know, it's military investigations. My mom's in Germany. She'd come over to help me. And I get a call in the middle of the store that they were looking for me, because apparently during that, going to the hospital and being there with him and everything, I paid for gas, but didn't pay for gas at the gas station next to the hospital. Like, I got gas and didn't pay for it. I just left. You know, you're just like in this trance, you know, and it's like, I'm going through the motions but I'm not really here, you know, and at that time, things were really rough already with our relationship, just with the struggle he had dealing with getting ready to go. You know, it was a unique situation to be in a hospital room in ICU, where half of my brain, you know, I'm crying, I'm trying to help keep him alive, I'm thinking about our future, and then the other half of my brain is quite literally like, if I don't bump his shoulder when his little alarm goes off that he's not breathing, then it's not murder, right? Like, literally, these are the brain things going through my brain. And
internal conflict
and astonishing thoughts, like, where is that coming from? Like, that's not who I am, you know?
Right.
And luckily they had a little prayer room right there at the end of the hall where the ICU was. And I just started going there. As every time I felt or her thoughts like that would come up in my head, you know, I just went and I just poured my heart out, like crying.
Michelle, talk to us a little bit more about that. Like, what, because I'm hearing your story, but why were you having that conflict? It was just because of you guys were growing apart. you were seeing a struggle. Tell
No,
us a little bit about that.
the struggle he was having was creating a lot of conflict. We were arguing a lot more.
Okay.
I was settling a lot, I would say, because I really tried hard not to argue in front of our kids.
Okay.
Wasn't always perfect, right? But it was something I didn't want to be part of their story. And so a lot of times I had to just swallow what I'm feeling and what I'm thinking. And it's how do I keep the peace? And how do I, at the time I thought it was just keeping peace and walking on eggshells to make sure like he's comfortable so there's no issue. And what I learned later, like that, I mean, it's similar to being in an abusive relationship. It's you're trying not to trigger somebody, right?
Because you had seen some major changes and you were seeing major, well, I'm going to use the word trauma, but were you there yet? Were you thinking, wow, something is really going on with
Oh
him?
yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. We were there. I would say right about there because before we almost didn't move to Germany with him.
Okay.
But we talked about it and, you know, we both agreed we wanted things to work well because we didn't want our children to have to deal with, you know, broken home. Right.
Okay.
And so, and we loved each other. At the end of the day, we loved each other. That wasn't a question. But, you know, people deal with their issues in different ways. And with him, it was the drinking, and then the drinking leads to being around people and in situations where you probably wouldn't make the same decisions if you weren't. And, you know, we're dealing at this point with multiple affairs. And at that point, it was kind of like, you know, how much more can I take, you know? And yeah, so that's kind of where I had the internal conflict.
Okay.
Point, you know, I wanted him to be okay. I wanted my children to have their dad, regardless of what happened with
And you
us.
loved him, but you were just seeing unhealthy behaviors.
Yeah,
that were affecting the whole family.
With loving somebody and you're hurt, you know, it's like, why are they doing this to me? Like, I know they love me, like, but because I could see that part too. And so it was just very difficult to reconcile those two things at the same time.
Okay.
After he came back, when he was injured, things really changed. I noticed a significant, I mean, he was drinking every day, almost all day. He was trying to get back downrange or deployed back to his, you know, his guys. I had concerns about that because part of his injury was that his lungs were singed with because basically when the tank blew up, he essentially inhaled the flame and it burned his lungs. And so I was really kind of fought with the chain of command a little bit about, you know, you're just going to hand him an inhaler and send him downrange back down to the desert. And I mean, he can't breathe well. He can't walk up the stairs to our apartment. Like, how's he going to, you know, carry gear and be okay and survive in an environment that's not suited for people that can't breathe well, you know, and much less the activity that, you know, they do. So he wanted to go though. So he went, and a couple months later, he came back again because their tank ran over another IED. Okay. And so he had lost a couple of soldiers between both his events. I learned after the first time he came home, it was the first time I'd ever seen him actually cry tears. Like, I'd seen him upset and where he would cry, but not really cry like most men do. But this was full on tears. He had been drinking and he was sitting at the table, and he told me the only thing he had said is, he said, "You just don't understand." He's like, "I know you were in the military and I know you kind of get it." He's like, "But you don't understand. Like, I had to pull out my 9mm and point it to a child that was no bigger than our middle." And he's like, how do I explain? How do I tell my children that? Like, how do I tell my kids I did that? You know? And so it's things like that. I mean, he gave me little glimpses, you know, of things like that, sorry.
What? No.
That's when I knew, like, he's really struggling.
Yeah.
and losing soldiers, and you feel responsible because, you know, you're the senior ranking person. And when he came back the second time, though, he came home, but didn't come home. He had actually asked them to put him in the barracks.
Okay.
Which I really struggled with. I didn't understand that. How was he going to get the help he needed? And the point was he didn't want to, and he knew I was going to be a proponent of that.
So this was a surprise to you that he didn't want to come home?
That he was in the, he got back to our base the day before he actually showed up at our door, and I had no idea he was even there.
Wow. Okay.
He didn't tell me. He said it was going to be a surprise, but I think it was more so he could get settled in the barracks without an argument. And so he did come home. He stayed the night that night. We talked a little bit. He got to see the kids when they woke up, because he came in the middle of the night, which was also odd. He came in the middle of the night, already drunk, So it was like, I knew something was going on. So long story short, I mean, I have to back up. So when he came home the first time, I had told him, I said, okay, fine. Well, you know what, at this point, like, I'll just take all my, like, the kids and my stuff, and, like, we'll go back to my parents. Like, we'll go home. And if we're going to work this out, like, then we'll have to get counseling. Like, something's going to have to change. Like, this can't continue in this dynamic. And he asked me to stay. And he said, just finish your contract at ACS, because it was contract work. I'm going back downrange anyways. Like, just let Brianna finish school. And so we did that, and I agreed to stay. But then the second time, he came home, and we ended up going home on vacation to see the families during Christmas, because he got home right before the holidays.
Yeah.
And essentially, he bought a ticket back to Germany for him, but not for the four of us. And so it was his way of just going back. And so I was at his parents' house when I realized that was what was happening.
Yeah.
And essentially I stayed with them until I got her, because it was right around the holidays. I stayed a couple extra weeks after he left with his parents, which was a little uncomfortable. I mean, I loved them. Like, it wasn't about that. It was just situation.
Right.
But I had no choice, because we really didn't have any money at that time. And I had to wait. I was going to do my tax return. I was going to file our tax return with the power of attorney, and we are going to move to my parents' house in Texas. And that's what we ended up doing. And it was a pretty ugly separation. There was a lot involved. There was a lot on both ends. It got to the point where I broke, and I was not the nicest person to him either. But it was more like, I wasn't trying to be vicious. It was me reacting out of the hurt. It was reacting, essentially.
As we do, right?
Yeah. And it was like, well, I'm not going to give you an inch then. And I'm not going to do this for you. And I'm not going to, whereas before I was pretty, like, pliable, right? Like, whatever, as long as kids are happy, I don't care. But at this point, I was kind of like, nope, you need to do what you need to do as a dad. And, just trying to be textbook. But the reason, and I'm sure it came off, however it came off, combative, whatever. It was just me trying to put up boundaries for myself.
Yeah.
Before we got together and got married, I already had trauma that I was carrying with me from my childhood, my teenage years, early military days. I mean, repeated, right? And so looking back, I can see why things devolved the way they did, because he wouldn't go to counseling. And when I got back to Texas and started getting counseling, I was diagnosed with CPTSD, complex PTSD, due to repeated, different, but repeated traumas through my life. And then our marriage became a trauma. And even though he was not physically abusive, the constant feeling of not needing to trigger him and keep everybody happy, make sure the kids are doing what they got to do, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's no different than the cycle we hear of women that are in that situation when they're being physically abused. It was just the keep dad happy at all costs. So we didn't, and it wasn't even like keep him happy at all costs so he's not a monster. It was more like he can't deal with his stuff. And if we don't keep him happy, then the house is not happy.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and I don't fault him for that. I mean,
Yeah.
it was my choice to take that approach, you
Yeah.
know, and it was the wrong way to go, but you live and you learn.
Yeah. You were thinking path of least resistance, as a
Absolutely.
lot of us do, right?
Yep. And one of the catalysts to us getting divorced, when I finally left we left Germany, was I found out while he was in the ICU that he was having an affair downrange. And, which is, I think, why part of my brain, I was having thoughts that I was like, where is that even coming from?
Yeah.
You know? And so it was a unique, going back to that, it just was very unique. It was a culmination of everything that had been building. And so I was just, I hate to say the word tired, because tired doesn't even capture it. I was just a shell of myself. Like, I was moving through the world, but I really wasn't there, if that makes sense. By then,
you were existing. You were
pretty
existing.
much. And trying to help my children exist, basically. Looking back, I thought I was helping them thrive. Now looking back and I look back at the situation and I'm like, no, they were just thriving also. I mean, they were just surviving the days too. And yeah, it's tough. It's tough to think about that.
Well, thank you for sharing that. What that was a lot.
I know.
You no, and it's important. It's important background. But I want you to pull out some key things that you would like people to understand. What do you want anyone that's listening to understand about combat trauma, PTSD, and how it affects your living, your day-to-day life? Those that sounded like you came to the table with your own trauma, and then your husband came to the table with trauma. Do you have just some key takeaways for what someone could look out for, or lessons learned or something?
I think the biggest lesson learned is, and the thing I tell people all the time, is that there's no shame in getting counseling. It doesn't mean you're in therapy. Maybe you are in therapy, but maybe it's just counseling. Maybe it's just somebody who's outside the situation that can talk to you and point out, y'all are not communicating because you see your point, you're trying to be heard, all the techniques you learn, right?
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And there's such a stigma around it. And I know that it's getting better, but I think also it's recognizing when, we should probably never have gotten married. I don't regret it. I love my babies and I wouldn't have them if I didn't.
Yeah.
But it's recognizing that, even before getting married, we should have probably done some type of marital counseling to see, like, is this right for us? I also think that where I struggled a lot and why I thought this would be a good conversation with you was, I thought being a veteran in the military would help me when he was struggling. And I went to the chain of command and I'm like, he is struggling. I'm telling him he needs this, that, and the other. Y'all need to make him go to counseling. He needs help. They didn't get involved. I mean, aside from letting him get a barracks room because marital problems. And I'm like, you put him in a situation where those people are all partying in the barracks. Like, that's not helping at all. And I was basically told, well, you're not in the military now. So if you want to, we can unsponsor and you guys can go home. Like, that was kind of their response. And I felt betrayed by that in a lot of ways, because I was a prior military, and it's like, would you be saying that if I was still wearing the uniform? I don't think so. Yeah. And, that kind of also feeds into, like, it took years, right? He got out of the military. We got divorced in 2005. He got out of the military in 2015. But over that time, his health got worse and worse and worse. And then he eventually passed away in 2021. And it was kind of unexpected how I felt. And I think part of it was me watching my children go through it. They were young. They needed help with all the things that happen when a parent dies, and they didn't know how to navigate it. So I was put into a position to help them navigate it with his family. It was very interesting place to be, I think, for the remainder of that year, because it was September when he passed. we weren't able to lay him to rest until October because they just had, I think it was Ida or some storm in New Orleans.
Okay.
And so there was a backup, and it created a ripple with my children. The stress and everything that was happening. They got into an argument in one of the hotel rooms. We were down there. And so these kids who were always close, and now it's 2 against 1, and mom's the evil person in all of it. You know, it just, it broke our entire family. And while I was trying to keep the kids together and help them navigate and help his family, I figured out really quickly too, that while they still probably cared about me because I had their grandchildren, there were comments made that made me realize that the place I thought I had with their family, I didn't have.
Yeah, I see.
And so that was pretty painful to find out too, and to find out at that time. So I honestly thank my prior trauma, because in that moment, I literally, everything got compartmentalized between, you know, that response you get when you've got trauma, but also, you know, military training, you're taught to kind of tuck things away, do the mission, and you can deal with it later. And that's kind of what I did for probably a good 5 to 6 months.
Yeah.
You know, and it's time for things to continue to work themselves through, and the kids to get to a place where they were okay enough, even though they were adults. And I had quite a few people say to me, "Why are you so upset?
Wow.
Like, you're divorced. You've been divorced almost 20 years. Like,
Wow.
I guess at the time, 16 years. Like, why is that?" You know, and I'm like, it's the father of my children. We have a complicated past. I don't think if it weren't for him going to combat that we would have actually gotten divorced.
Right.
I think that had he gotten help, things would have been different. And it's hard.
You think that was what was probably the hardest part of that in that reality of him passing, and like his family kind of treating you how you didn't expect, or your friends and family going, what is your problem? Why are you?
Yeah,
is
they're
there?
just kind of like, oh well, like,
Yeah.
you know, sad for the kids, but you know, and people even make jokes because there's jokes when you're divorced with somebody. It's they're the bad guy, you're the good guy, whatever. And I didn't see things that way. I didn't always like him. He didn't always like me, but you know, we tried. And honestly, in the last couple of years of his life, we did a really good job of talking through a lot of stuff and working through a few things. And I got a couple of apologies I never thought I'd see. You know, when you're looking at the possibility of death, I think your perspective changes, and his did. I mean, he worked hard to reconnect with his kids and, you know, talk about some of the things that he wasn't proud of with them. And you know, and again, I don't want to paint him as a bad guy. He was not a bad guy at all.
Right.
He was struggling. And, so being in a good place with him when he passed, we were in a good place, but other people either didn't know or didn't understand that. And it wasn't until about a year later, I read something online on Facebook. Actually, I was doom scrolling. I was just having a moment where I didn't want to do anything but just scroll. And I saw a meme. It was just a little picture, and it said something about, and it was actually for somebody that had lost a pet, and they were just very grieved by that. And it said something about disenfranchised grief. And I was like, oh, I never heard that term before. You know, I have family that all have dogs. So I was curious, and I looked it up, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And it was the door that opened, that unraveled all of what I thought I had dealt with and put away. And I had to start over with the whole grief process. And there was anger. There was, you know, if you'd only gotten help, like, it didn't have to be like this. You didn't have to be alone when you died. You know, I could have, you know, I don't know, there's all the woulda, coulda, shouldas, you know. And when I look at what people go through with the regular grief, you know, steps, and I hate to say regular grief, but non-disenfranchised, things that people expect. The process really wasn't that much different for me.
Right.
It's just that other people didn't get it. And so it was hard to talk to people about it or feel like it was okay to feel what I felt. That was the part that was hard, because if he and I had been married, people would have put their arms around me.
Right.
And that wasn't the case.
Mm-hmm.
Even my oldest daughter had asked me at one point, and honestly, I thought I was doing this more for them, but in retrospect, I probably was my own way of dealing with things. And it was kind of the anger I had with the people that all of a sudden cared about him because they found out he passed, and they're flooding stuff on Facebook, and and it just really struck a nerve with me because, you're posting a year later, hey, I came to check on you and saw you passed away. And I'm like, it's been a year.
Yeah.
And so I started posting pictures of the girls and to him and talking to him here and there, not like obsessively, but like,
Right.
So that's when a lot of, even my daughter was like, why are you doing that?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
They actually asked you why?
She was curious. It wasn't, I don't think it was she was just kind of like, I think she was trying to figure out, was I just doing it for attention, or was I truly feeling something? And so I talked to her, and I was open with my oldest, and I was very honest with her about it. I said, I'm just processing things in my own way. I said, I told her I hate that people are, I don't want your dad to be forgotten. I said, regardless of what happened in our marriage too, that's the other thing a lot of people don't understand, is I separate who he was as a soldier and who he was as a man and a husband and it might be weird for a lot of people, but for me, no matter how I felt about him with us being married, he ultimately, even though it didn't happen right away, because of his injuries that he sustained in combat, gave his life. His kids lost their dad because of his service. He deserves to be honored. He deserves to be remembered. I do the Wounded Warrior Project 5K every year because of him. And I did it even before he passed. I started, I think, in 2018, and people don't get it. And I'm like, you don't have to get it. Now I'm like, you don't have to get it. Back then,
I was going to say, people don't have to get it. And that's why I want you to be on here today, because it's important to know that you can feel lonely and people cannot understand, but it's important that you have the space and you feel okay to share. And that was good of you to like post and then your daughter to ask questions, and then you not get offended, but just explain to her why. That's very mature of both of you, because like she didn't just be like, Mom, why are you doing that? That's stupid. She was like, why, Mom, are you doing that? And you were able to explain. Did that give you some relief? And like,
it did a little bit. And it also helped me understand that it was actually making it harder for her.
Okay.
Because, they're still connected on Facebook. So anytime I would post something to him, it would pop up for her. And it was, so she, and she said, Mom, honestly, with all the people that have gone wayside because of, she kind of saw a lot of people for who they really were when this happened. Mm-hmm. She didn't want me posting pictures of them or the kid, them on his page. And so I didn't. I said, okay, I'll respect that. And, today I still do it every now and then, but it's usually like Memorial Day. It's like, don't forget his name, or on his birthday or something like that. But I kind of pulled back from that, realizing that even though I wanted to do it because I wanted people to remember him and not use his passing as an opportunity to garner their own attention in the way that social media does.
Yeah.
That's what was happening. People that didn't check on him are all of a sudden posting about him every other day about how, broken up they are and this and that. And I'm like, God forgive me, because I'm not anyone to say who's feeling what, right? Like that's the whole point of this conversation. But I couldn't help but feel like if those people had been present in his life and really speaking into his life, he could have still been alive, because his injuries were a big part of why he passed. But a lot of it had to do too with, you combine that with continuing to drink and things like that to cope it and not being in a good headspace. Like all those things help shorten your life. And call it intuition, call it God, God messages. I don't know what it was, but I always felt, especially in the last few years, like it was very important. And I constantly, every other day, was like, did you call your dad today? Have you talked to your dad? Have you talked to your dad? Like, I wanted to see the kids repair, and not that they had horrible relationships, but there were some things, from the years. I wanted to see that, excuse me, see them repair that for them, right? Because I knew when my biological dad passed, without going into that whole situation, we didn't really reconcile, and he wanted to, but I was struggling with it, and then he passed, and I never got that opportunity, and I regretted it. Knowing that he was dealing with this injury, and that I couldn't say how long he would live, but I didn't think he would live as long as he was supposed to originally live. And I just didn't want the kids to miss that opportunity.
Well, that's good. So you encourage them to keep a connection and a relationship with him?
Yes, absolutely. And to try to work through things, go visit him, talk to him, that kind of stuff. And I started doing the same thing. I started checking on him every now and then. And, sometimes it was a fine conversation. Sometimes it was, he was agitated with me because why are you bothering me? It's like, whatever. And sometimes I didn't feel like checking on him, but it was the right thing to do. And I did. And
it is important. I always do kind of a risk assessment in my brain. And I know that that lingo, lingo. And if it's something that I can't live with, then I reach out, or I just innately, and I don't know if that's military training or not, it may be, but like if it's something, I kind of do an automatic risk assessment. And if I can't lay my head down at night, or it's something that I'm not going to want to end my days having in my soul, then I do the same thing. It doesn't matter how uncomfortable it is. I do reach out, or I have that conversation, or, make that call, send that message. Yeah, for sure. So that's important.
And on a positive, if I can just say, I will say there are people out there who do embrace that, and who do. There's a group called Wear Blue I got connected with through a volunteer opportunity, and they help surviving children, Gold Star families, the children. They have a whole mentorship program. They match them with somebody that's military. And so I was volunteering at an event, and I learned about it. And at first I felt like I shouldn't be there, because I'm like, well, technically we're not Gold Star, because we weren't, he didn't die in combat, but we also weren't married at the time. And I was telling one of the ladies that owns that nonprofit, or runs that nonprofit, and about our story. And she said, well, you may not be a Gold Star, but you're definitely a surviving family. She goes, you may not be a surviving spouse. His kids are definitely surviving kids, and you're part of that family unit, whether you're married or not,
Right.
And she just said, I encourage you to keep coming, keep supporting these kids, because it's therapeutic, but also just being around the other families, and hearing their stories and listening to some of the things they've had to navigate. And I started to really recognize then that the journey wasn't different. Not many people recognize that the journey's the same. I would dare to say it's even more complicated, because, you're fighting about it in your brain and your heart. It's like, why?
Yeah. No, I was going to say that there's an added layer of complication to it, because you're not directly married, and you're having to navigate that.
And we're having to help the kids make decisions that legally I don't really have a right to make. I can only give them guidance, and they're the ones that are the next of kin. And it got very complicated. It was, I tell the kids all the time when we talk about, and they're at a place now where we can talk about dad, and it's fine, and they share memories and they laugh about stuff. And I love that they are there now. But we kind of joke sometimes. We're like, Mom, you should have just married dad again before before he passed away.
Before
And I'm
the-
like, why? What are you talking about? Because he had stayed with us for a few weeks, and we had to
Mm,
have a conversation with the girls and their brother that, you know, Dad's staying with us for a few weeks to spend time with y'all. It was right around when COVID started. But I was like, he's on his way to go to El Paso. Like, this is not, I don't want y'all to get the wrong idea here.
yeah. Well, that's good. That's good that you kept the lines clear there. Yeah, for sure.
But
Uh-huh.
they said it, and I even thought it too. And I had never said it out loud, but they recently said it. And I was like, it's interesting because I thought the same thing. I was like, man.
Well, that's good to hear that you reconciled and like got over some of your conflict.
Yeah, we did.
In the end. So that, I think that's probably very important. It's probably helped you be able to move forward after his passing to help your kids and even be in those uncomfortable situations in a little bit better headspace, probably.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say at the end of the day, I just hope anybody else going through that, whether it is an ex-spouse or it's a best friend or a pet, or, I mean, all of these things, I mean, you're emotionally attached and you're with somebody or some pet or something for extended periods of times, and you're connected, and it's, when that's ripped away, it's painful.
Okay.
And,
Good.
you know,
I was wanting to hear what you had to say to someone else that would be in that situation.
yeah, I think just feel okay to feel how you feel. Like, you know, how you feel is how you feel. And we all feel differently. We all grieve differently. We all handle stress and trauma and all those things differently. I would just, my only caution would be to make sure you're surrounded by, you know, people that are speaking light and truth into you, and not doubt and making you feel isolated or lonely or wrong for that, you know, whether that's counseling or circle of people that you have to support you. There's groups. I got involved with TAPS, which was technically for people that, and again, I talked to them. I told them, I said, look, we weren't married, and they said, didn't matter.
Right. They are welcoming to not, you know, ex-spouses or fiancés. I've been to a couple of their groups where the fiancés were there, which is often shows up very different too, because they're not actually married, which you would think. But I've spoken to fiancés, and they have very similar stories to what you're saying in regards to their disenfranchised grief, because people don't treat them like you weren't actually married. Well, yeah, they were on their way to being married, and you were married, right.
And then,
Now, so let's flip that. What would you say to churches, communities, the friends, and that are trying to support somebody, support someone that is, I'm laughing because my alarm was going off, but that's it. Support somebody that is dealing with this disenfranchised grief. Like, they're not, you know, maybe they're a fiance, maybe they're ex-wife, maybe any, like, you know, not connected to that person. What would you say to people trying to support them?
Grief is grief. At the end of the day, grief is grief. We all grieve the same. We all go through the same emotions, you know, and they always say it's not always going to be in the same order. And, you know, even today, it's 4.5, it'll be 5 years in September since he passed. And even, you know, just a couple months ago, I was listening to a song and completely broke down because it triggered a memory from when we were married in our early days, when it was a good time. Yeah. And that's going to happen just like it would happen if we were married, or if, you know, it was something that's recognized. So I think the best thing that, you know, churches and supporting, you know, groups can do, whether it's friends, what I just think you have to recognize that grief is grief, and you don't have to agree if somebody's grief is right or wrong. If they're hurting and you care about them, that's what should matter.
Yeah. That's beautiful and true. Because just because you may not see why they have grief doesn't mean that they don't. And what I've learned more recently is a person's emotions and feelings and what they're going through is their perspective, and you got to support them, and either support them through that or like, well, definitely through it, but not invalidate their emotions and feelings.
Absolutely.
I think it's essential.
No,
And I hope that if anything comes out of this, that's what people hear today, is that it doesn't matter where you were to that person. Grief is grief, because sometimes, like, my sisters grieve my husband, and some people might feel like, well, you were just their sister, his sister-in-law. What's the big deal? So, and they need support in that too. And and it's not going to be necessarily the primary griever that's going to support them, but other people need to.
yeah.
But thank you so much, Michelle, for sharing your story and just being open and honest with us. I would ask one last question. As you look back now and you've done some healing, and we're always on a healing journey, what would you hope to leave with anyone else that's been in your same or similar circumstances, or anyone just feeling lonely because they don't feel like they have the not privilege, but they don't have the relationship that people acknowledge, the acknowledgeable grief relationship? What would you say to them today?
I would say if their circle of people around them are not embracing them, that it's most likely that they just don't understand, and they just need to find somebody or some people that do. Like I said, you can Google it. There's grief groups all over the place, all kinds of different situations. And
what was the name of that one? Blue Star?
Wear Blue. It's WEAR Blue.
Okay.
That one is it's a really good one. I love them. They, like I said, they mentor the children. They match them with an active duty member. So they get that mentorship from someone who's in the service, like their parent was.
Okay.
And they do it around a 5K. So there's like a cohort where they're training and and the kids end up carrying a flag during a 5K at the end of the semester, if you will. It's a great, you can Google it. It's a great program. I love it. Support it.
Is it nationwide?
I believe so. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love me a 5K. So
they do them all over the place.
Yeah, especially if it's supporting something.
Usually the 5K, at least in San Antonio, falls around Memorial Day. So we'll have one coming up, and they do like a run every month leading up to it. So definitely look that up on their website. And then there was TAPS as well. If you're military, if you're not military and you're hearing this, there are plenty of other programs as well. I've reached out to civilian, non-military organizations. I've met a couple of people that way as well that were actually in similar situations to mine. So it was really helpful to get that insight as well. So just don't isolate yourself.
Okay. That's what I was going to say. What I'm hearing from you is to find community, allow your grief, talk, have conversations, and and just honor yourself and your loved one, no matter what that looks like in a healthy way. So.
Absolutely. 100%. And it's okay to cry.
Yes, it is. It is.
I'm one of those. Like, I'm not going to cry, but I've finally learned to, like, sometimes those tears flow and it's so refreshing to your own, even just your physically in your body.
100%. There's some scientific knowledge in regards to tears and what they carry. So having those tears, it's important. And it shows up in the DNA of grief tears plus joy tears. They all have a different makeup. So it's important. It's important to cry and let it out, and find community, right?
Yes, definitely find community.
Well, thank you for being part of this conversation and bringing it. I had told Michelle that I had been wanting to talk about this because I do have several friends that are not your situation, but similar, right? And I just thought it was a very important conversation to have. What today reminds us is that grief is not always come in a neat little package, right? And what we expect it's going to be. And even when like typical grieving, I guess, or normal grieving, as we said, like for me, that I lost my husband that I was married to, like that even shows up in strange ways too. But sometimes like it's going to show up in a complicated relationship that maybe you're just a partner or you're an ex-wife or you're a fiance. And I think you're right. What you spoke about today is that a lot of people don't understand or expect that from maybe an ex-wife because they're like, oh, they already closed the door on that. Well, that person was part of your nervous system, a part of your history, a part of your memories. And so when they're no longer here, that significantly affects you and is going to cause grief. So I just think it's truly important that we as a society acknowledge that and help people grieve and talk about it more.
Yeah.
So if anyone out there is carrying grief like this, please know that you're seen. Reach out, find the community that will share in that grief with you. As Michelle has mentioned, there are several organizations out there. And if the people that you're surrounding yourself with don't know how to deal with that, then go and find people that will. I appreciate Michelle being here and just being so honest with her story and sharing it with all of us so that we can learn a little bit more about disenfranchised grief and help our family and friends deal with that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, that's carried forward. Until next time, take care of your heart and keep moving forward.
Thanks for watching and listening to Military Broadcast Radio on Roku TV. If you missed today's episode, the podcast will be available on
and all major platforms shortly after we go off the air. We're here for you, not for us, giving veterans a voice. This is Military Broadcast Radio.